Welcome to Your College Bound Kid,
a podcast for parents, college counselors, students, and anyone who wants a weekly deep dive into the world of college admissions.
Hi, I'm Susan, and I'm a college counselor and have read applications for a small liberal arts college and 2 research universities. My twins are recent college graduates.
I'm Lisa, and I'm a clinical psychologist and college counselor. I have a daughter in college, a daughter in high school, and a son in middle school. After 30 years in Chicago, we recently moved to North Carolina.
My name is Mark. I'm a college coach in Atlanta and the parent of 2 daughters. Karis, a graduate of Davidson College, and she is the founder of the Spanish tutoring company, SpanishHelpToday.com. And Joy has a bachelor's degree from the University of Georgia and a master's degree from North Carolina State University. She works in private practice in Raleigh as a mental health therapist. And I'm so blessed to be able to work alongside both my beautiful daughters at ScholarMatch for You, a college counseling firm that I founded in 2010. Good afternoon, friends. I'm exhilarated. A lot of reasons for me to be happy right now, but I'm going to get to one. We are about to have our first Q&A with one of our national thought leaders in 4 years. It's been 4 years since we've done this, and it's less than 5 hours away. I'm very, very, very excited about this. And we've gotten a great response. At first, the response was slow, and I was wondering what's up. I found out we were having tech issues, and people couldn't register. And then once we got that fixed, boy, people started signing up in droves. And so we have people signed up from Nevada, Connecticut, North Carolina, Illinois, Wisconsin, India, Texas, Maryland, Virginia, Pennsylvania, Colorado, New York, Washington, Illinois, Massachusetts, Tennessee, Florida, Iowa, Ohio, and Oregon. And you guys asked some incredible questions because we give an opportunity in the sign-up form to list the questions you want to ask. So I'm just really excited. And we keep getting a good turnout like this. I'm going to keep scheduling these. And so I'll see you signed up in less than 5 hours. Of course, you'll hear this after it's over. So for what that's worth. Also excited because my mom and my sister are coming to town, and they don't get here that often anymore. They're from Southern Ontario, south of Toronto, and that is 5 days away. So pretty pumped about that. And I love surprises. You know, I once planned a family reunion for my dad's 80th and my mom's 70th. They're 10 years apart in age. And we had people that came in from 11 states, 4 countries. We were all in Harrisonburg, Virginia. We had like 11 timeshares rented. And I worked on that for a year and a half. And my parents didn't know. So they got there thinking they were going on a vacation just with our immediate family, only to see everybody there. It was one of the highlights of my life, to be honest. And my sister and my mom don't know that both of my daughters are flying in. So I'm pretty pumped about that. So listen, we have what I think is a pretty exciting episode today. Susan and I are going to, it's going to be the second part of the trilogy. We had Julia a few weeks ago, Susan now, and then we'll have Lisa coming up in a few weeks here. And we're talking about how do you actually decide? How do you make a decision? You got some good choices. How do you decide? I thought that Susan's content was just profound. Sometimes I forget, because I'm so used to working with Susan. But I sat there, listened to her, and I was just mesmerized by her insights and her wisdom. So I think you're going to really like that. I was planning on just going 20, 25 minutes, but sometimes you just have to read the room. And I was like, she was on a roll. So I know that I'm personally going to be borrowing the system she teaches. She's teaching us 6 ways to process that decision. And I absolutely loved it. I think you're going to like it as much as I did. And then we have a brand new interview with Andy with Andy Strickler. And you're saying, hey, I thought we just heard from Andy Strickler. Yeah, we heard from Andy Strickler on how file reading is different in a large school group or a busy school group versus regular school group. But if you listen carefully, I said, Andy's going to be back to talk to us about Connecticut College. And, I just love Andy's whole approach to things. He does 4 things that I like in anybody that I interview. First of all, he's knowledgeable. He's been at 5 institutions, and I love that different perspective. Secondly, he's transparent. He's not guarded. He's willing to take some risk and share some things when someone else might play it safe. I've interviewed several people whose names I won't mention that, man, I felt like a dentist trying to pull a tooth. So I don't like that. I like people that are like, Andy, ask him a question, you get a straight answer. And then he's very student-centered. You can't listen to Andy for more than 3 minutes without seeing how student-centered he is. And then lastly, he's not boring. You have to still be a good communicator or you put the audience to sleep. So I really think it's a great interview. It's a 3-parter. It's our first time we've had a college spotlight on a Monday episode, but we just have so many interviews right now that we're doing. Most of them, our team members, most of our co-hosts are out doing interviews. And so we've got a nice chunk in the kitty, and we don't want them sitting there getting stale for a half a year. So we're going to be putting more spotlights on Monday episodes. We're not going to the full 4-parter on Thursday, I promise you that. Although today's episode is going to be a little long because I just had to let Susan go. And I don't want to break it up into 2 parts. I just think it fits together as a whole entire unit together. So that's what we're going to talk about. A few announcements. The Common App came out this week and said that they are keeping the same prompts. So that's encouraging because I like the prompts. It's easy for people. I wish they would announce that a little earlier, but it's all good. Of course, little Napoleon down there in Florida, he's up to his tricks again. I see they're getting rid of all diversity and education spots within the University of Florida system. So I'm disappointed. I'm not saying there's not some cases where people have gone overboard, but tremendous value good diversity professional can provide in so many ways. And so just disappointing to see what's happening in the University of Florida. And that's my opinion, but I feel strongly about it. I know a lot of you believe that as well. So those are a couple of things. Let me talk about something more positive. ScholarMatch. ScholarMatch. Yes, ScholarMatch is recruiting new college counselors, college coaches. They've identified our podcast listenership as a great group. And so if you have a heart for this work and you love admissions and love learning and you also love helping a student, well, they have gifted and talented under-resourced students all across the country. They're looking at a couple hundred counselors. They're doing information sessions throughout the month of March. Just go to scholarmatch.org. And I'll also put the information in the show notes as well. So you can see the sign-up sessions and some links in there. And friends, if you go to the show notes halfway down, right underneath a description of Andy Strickler and his interview, you'll see the remaining 2 dates that ScholarMatch has for their info sessions in March. They've got one on Thursday, March 14th, and that's 7 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Central, 5 p.m. Mountain, and 4 p.m. Pacific. And they've got one on Tuesday, March 26th, and that's a morning one. It would be 1 p.m. on the East Coast and 10 a.m. on the West Coast, Tuesday, March 26th. I've also put a link to their volunteer contact form in the show notes. But it's just a cause that I think is really important, and it's so in line with our mission of to make college knowledge available to all. So very excited about that. All right, well, let's dive right in without any further ado. I want you to hear Pearls of Wisdom from Susan Treat. I'm here with Susan, and as promised, we promised you multiple answers to the question of how is a student supposed to decide amongst all their options where to go. Susan, you ready for it? The $1 million question.
Am, Mark. You bet. No one expects this to be the hardest part of the process.
But, it's actually a good problem in some ways because it's a lot better than either I have no options or I don't like any of my options. But I guess it could apply either way, though, if you're not thrilled with your options or if you have some really hard decisions to make because you love your options. But go ahead. You've been working and tweaking this back since our Westtown days and even since then. So why don't you share your pearls of wisdom?
Well, as you said, it's a nice problem to have, but it's also like being in the dressing room at your favorite department store, trying to pick out, an outfit for the wedding you have to go to on Saturday. And there are a bunch of things you like. And sometimes you wish only one thing jumped off the rack at you and you bought it and you left. But that's an oversimplification when it comes to, a purchase.
No, but I think it's a good one, though. I think it's a good one because it can show the point that there can be an element of stress in there.
Absolutely. But, the old saying of variety is the enemy of choice is sometimes with kids applying to, upwards of 20 colleges now, you often end up with a lot of options on the table. And if you don't, that's okay too. It's nice to feel that you're making the selection and that, oh, look, I only got into one place. Or, sometimes the buyer's regret of early decision of, well, gee, maybe I should have, spread my list out a little bit more and had more options to choose from. I don't think you should ever be disappointed about going early decision and nailing down that choice early on, because you'll never know if maybe you wouldn't have gotten in the regular review. And that's not to sound scary, but it's true.
The only thing I would add to that, Susan, is, I every year I have one or two people that they're not happy with their award. And even if they did a net price calculators aren't guaranteed. Now, a lot of times they can appeal that. And as you know, if your school admits you, they want you, and they really will work hard to make it work. But depending on, especially some of these business owners, those calculators don't capture all of the deductions that get added in sometimes as untaxed income. And they can end up getting, a bill, or not a bill, but they can end up being asked to pay a lot more than the calculator made them think then. And that can be stressful for those families because once they've, that can be tough. So I think that's the only time when I think when I see sometimes some second choice misgivings a little bit. But usually it works out, but sometimes some of those families, that's just important to know, right? Do the calculator, talk to a school, ask if you're a business owner, particularly with a lot of expenses, try to set up a meeting, with the financial aid office and ask them to do what some of these other schools are doing, a full review of their tax returns so you can get a more accurate accurate read. Yeah, but it doesn't happen that much, but I thought I'd throw it in there because I get it about once or twice a year.
Yeah, no, it does happen. And, this is why a student who's applying early decision round one should at the same time get their other applications out, especially any of the rolling or priority or early action applications that allow it, and stack the process early. And you may say, well, gee, if I'm early decision round one, that's a lot of work to go through if I get in and then, I have to withdraw all those applications. Yeah, it is. But this whole process is about setting yourself up for success, for having options to choose from. And if your early decision one bottoms out, either because you don't get in or it's unaffordable, then you have these potentially other acceptances in your back pocket that, you haven't withdrawn from those colleges until the dust settles on the financial aid award. So, you got to have your safety net.
Yeah, and I always tell people if money is a concern, don't withdraw. Don't withdraw until you see that the aid offer is, consistent with what the calculator said. I think nowadays, it's rare. It's rare I would ever counsel someone not to apply early action to your early action schools. I think the only thing I can really think of is if at the last second somebody recommended something and you were just rushing through and you never had time to put in a quality application. But
right.
I think even this is where I've changed, Susan. I know what your thoughts are on this. Even if someone has had a little incremental dip from the junior year fall to the spring, I used to say, well, you don't want to be on a downward decline. And if it's a big decline, I think that would be of concern. But I think, if you had a chance at all, they could defer you to want to see another semester, but at least they know where your heart is. And so if you were that uncompetitive, they could deny you. But if you had a chance at all, they could defer you and still in the back of their mind, no, this person was committed to us. So Vince and I talked about that the other day, maybe 3 or 4 months ago. And we were both inclined, even with a modest dip from from junior year, fall to spring, to still have that student apply early action. And so there's really no times other than the last second someone thought of a school and they just couldn't get it together to do good quality essays, that I would recommend not doing early. What's harder for me though is regular. So, you do a bunch of earlies and you do your ED, but boy, some of those schools in regular, some of them are, a lot of work. And so I struggle with my advice on that. And I usually end up either having people do some, but not all, or do an outline, bullet point outline.
Yep.
Because nobody really wants to be doing 6 or 7 applications between December. Well, one of those ED schools notified December 20th this year. I can't remember which one.
Gosh, that was late.
Yeah, it really was. It's between December 20th and many of them have January 1 dates, which is ridiculous.
Right. Although I noticed a number this year, we're pushing them back to, January 3rd.
Yeah.
So, just to take it off the holiday.
I don't know if you heard this, but Chris Gruber from Davidson did a podcast before you joined our team of how COVID caused them to look at their entire admission office and all their practices. And especially the whole thing of test optional, right? Like, wow, if we could make this drastic a change, what else do we need to change that's not student friendly? And This was the first thing he said. Why are we asking people for a January 1? This is ridiculous. We're not reading then. Let them enjoy their families. So they backed it up to January 7th, but there's still some holdouts there.
Well, that goes back to when people mailed their applications in, Mark, because, when I was at Bates in right up until 1990,
right,
half of the applicant pool their applications arrived 3 days on either side of January 1st.
Mm-hmm.
So just, that was back.
Sure.
We were reading under 5,000 applications at that time. It's, close to 10,000 now, but literally those are the kids who mailed their applications so that they would be in our office before January 1st. They didn't believe we really meant the postmark right at that point, which is what colleges went by. And the rest of the kids were mailing their applications on, December, 30th or 31st. So there was literally this monumental amount of mail that came in. And back in the day of paper processing, it took, a week, 2 weeks to even get the applications in folders so you could begin reading them, let alone notifying kids what was missing. So there was a lot of drag on the process at that time. And that was why I think colleges, moved from the old deadline of January 15th, which was customary, to January 1st, so that they would literally have complete folders and be ready to, go at it by the second week of January. But I think that's just a holdover. The schools that now have January 1st, there's no reason for it because everything is electronic.
Well, I asked Jeremiah Quinlan of Yale this question because they're one of the January 1st people.
Right.
And his response was, and I haven't seen if they've changed this year, but this was last year. He said, with 57,000 applications, we need every single day.
I understand that.
Every single day. And so he was pretty dug in that, because it's interesting. I did a podcast, actually, half the Ivy League has moved. And so other people with similar acceptance rates have moved. And so I still don't buy that. I think with enough planning, and sometimes I ask myself, if someone gave you $100,000 bonus, if you change the date, would you be able to do it and make it work? I have a feeling the answer would be yes, but that's just me. But we're getting off topic. We're doing what we love to do. It's so funny. I'm going to get real transparent with our listeners. Susan and I, we're like, it's almost like athletes, like where you have to have your warm up in the baseball team before we come on. So we always have like our 20 to 30 minute chit chat. And I said, Susan, I got some stuff I got to take care of with my taxes, so we can't do our chit chat.
So here we are doing it.
Yeah, so right? I just do it on live in front of everybody. This is what we always do. But I love talking with you about this stuff. You're such a great thought partner. But let's get into let's play Nishant's question, and then let's have your comments.
Hey Mark, this is Nishant. Thank you for everything that you and your team do. I had a question that I was hoping I could get your help on. We have been extremely blessed that my daughter has received admission to all the schools that she has applied to, other than one highly selective university. Her top two choices are ranked extremely high in the subject areas that she's looking to pursue. Question: how should I help her make a decision if all things are equal across the board? Thanks, Mark.
All right. So you want to just take it where you want to go with it?
Sure. Well, Nishan, this is a very, very thoughtful question because we are so hyper fixated on the process of getting in that often we forget that this can be a wonderfully challenging part of the process. And I find that it's where parents and kids can be farther apart than they realized they were. So I think, that once the applications are all submitted, parents and kids shouldn't necessarily stop talking about the process. And I find that the students very often as seniors, especially once the adrenaline drops down and senior year moves on and settles into kind of a more normal pattern, and they're thinking about other things than the admissions process, which colors the first semester of the senior year so dramatically, that often the internal landscape starts taking new things into consideration, and feelings can really change about the college list for a lot of kids. That was certainly my experience at our school, Mark, that I saw, kids stopping by the office and saying, now that I've not been thinking about it, I'm thinking about it. And I may be thinking about it a little differently. So, I think without putting pressure on the kids, parents can continue to do some exploring, maybe some visiting if they haven't been on campuses in the first semester when the academic work was such a priority for their students, and that they can continue to just talk as a family about, what's important, what everybody thinks about these options, and not kind of letting it sit in a dark corner. A little bit of shadow, fine. Let the kids move on, get back involved in whatever they're doing at school. Be in the senior play. Go to the championship of whatever the game is. But so, I think getting back on campuses, especially once a student has been admitted, can be life-changing. If you haven't been on a campus where your child has applied, there's always this, well, do I bother spending the money to go and visit now, or do I wait till I see if my son or daughter's been admitted? That's a consideration. But a visit can be pretty miraculous. And certainly with an acceptance in hand, a college can look entirely different. Absolutely entirely different when the student no longer feels like they're in the judgment, being judged, where they are then in the position of judging the institution. It's a very empowering time to visit a campus. So whether during the waiting period or after the acceptance comes in, there you go. What can you do necessarily if you're not on the campus? You certainly can figure out how to zero in and talk. And this I would be saying to the student, talk to a student in your major. When I was in school, I often had seniors come in and say, hey, who from our school is at Case Western? Or, who's at UCLA? Or who's at Guilford? And I would be able to, immediately pull up names and contact information for them, because suddenly, oh, wow, you're thinking about engineering, and you're thinking about, a giant university, or you're thinking about being undecided at a smaller liberal arts college. Let's get you talking to someone who's actually from your high school. So sometimes teachers and guidance counselors can be helpful in that regard. Sometimes LinkedIn and Facebook can be helpful in that regard too, where you're trying to track down students that maybe were a year or two older. That can be quite wonderful. You can also ask your admissions counselor to be put in touch with somebody who shares your interests. Whether it's you want to be an animal behavior major or, a Spanish language major, or whether you want to talk to a student athlete, or maybe to another Jewish student, or, someone who's from a similar background where you want to talk about a day in the life of what it's like. Admissions officers can very often be very helpful. What they won't do is give you the name and email address of a random college student, but they will contact the student themselves and say, could I share your contact information? Would you be willing to, maybe do a call with an admitted student or a pre-admitted student? So there are ways to kind of jump that hurdle. But let's talk for a minute about a framework. And when I listened to Julia's recording with you, Mark, on 402, I was so impressed with her insight in a school right now, working with kids. So parents, if you didn't hear Julia on 402, go back and listen, because I think it was a wonderful, wonderfully insightful. But here's how I look at this. I have what I call the 6 F's of fit. We're going to get really corny here. Right. And I'd show you my slide if I had it. But, Mark, maybe I'll give you my slide and you can put it on,
I'll put on
the show notes.
Mm-hmm. Happy to.
If people go. And I'm not going to belabor these, because I think you parents out there, you can fill in the blanks. Counselors, feel free to, if you're looking for a good framework.
There you go.
This is all yours. You can borrow it, liberally. So number 1 is family. Mm-hmm. All right. What are the family's priorities? What are the logistics? What's going on in your family that should influence the student's final choice? All right. I mean, I've read applications. I've worked with thousands of kids. I know there are everything from, an elderly grandparent where suddenly the family's priorities of not being far from that individual really matter more than they did earlier on. Maybe there are medical issues in the family. Maybe there are a whole range of family issues. Sometimes families have clarity on whether or not they want to put a kid on a plane and fly them to college and never get to go watch them play, volleyball. Now, hopefully those things were all on the table early on, but this is just to revisit the family issues to see if anything has risen in importance. Okay. Number 2, financial. That follows right on the heels of family. And we've talked a lot about that on the podcast. As financial aid awards come in, as merit awards either come in or don't come in, hopefully parents have prepared themselves for this eventuality of cost. They've talked with their child about what's reasonable, and they're ready to let that be a significant influence on the, which colleges remain on the viable list. Because some colleges may have taken themselves out of consideration, based on finances. Number 3, focus. What's your student's academic focus and what's their non-academic focus? What are the non-negotiable priorities of academics and non-academics that are incredibly important to the student as they make their final choice? Again, there shouldn't be a college on the list for which there was not a reasonable academic and non-academic fit. My college search, I didn't apply to colleges that didn't have a great writing program. I knew pretty much any high-quality liberal arts college would give me what I wanted academically in terms of exploring. And what I needed was 4 years of happiness on a social and extracurricular level, which was something I was pining for. So what are the must-haves? If your student is undecided, that means they still have probably 2 or 3 academic interests that need to be fully present at that college so that they can explore their interests. If they're hyper-focused on an academic plan, have they been admitted to the engineering program, or did they get put into maybe a second choice, non-engineering program? Did they get into the direct admit nursing program, or siphoned off into a non-direct fit program? It's going to vary from school to school. What did they apply for? What did they get into? That's obviously going to be a factor. Number 4, I call fellowship. This I define as who does your student want to share the experience with at their college or university? And I would say diversity and affinity are probably the two most pressing and important decision makers in my category that I call fellowship. Diversity meaning, what are the voices they want to hear? Do they want everybody to be like them, to come from the same background and never be challenged, never get kind of that real world, what? You mean everybody doesn't think about this exactly the way that I think about it, whether it's politics or religion or, you name it. What's their understanding of this what this college education is going to deliver for them in terms of both affirming and challenging their own perspective. But think of it, parents, this way. Who does your child want to share their college experience with? And that's what I'm referring to as fellowship here. Now, affinity, so we get diversity, but what's affinity? I think we can all tolerate a very high level of challenge and diversity in our lives as long as we have enough affinity, enough affirmation of our most important beliefs and values, right? So whether those are cultural, whether they're religious, whether they're political, however we define that as an individual and as a family, what's the affinity there? So for a Muslim student, they may not go to a predominantly Muslim institution unless they have hung their whole college search on that. But is there enough of a community of both a religious and a cultural community for them? If you're an international student coming from halfway around the world, you're coming from Africa, you're coming from China, you're coming from India, is there going to be a comfort level with an affinity group so that you then are empowered to go out there and learn all about everybody else's? I think that's super important. So that's number 4, that's fellowship. Number 5 is the future. So the future is, how is the college going to get you where you want to go? Now that might be as specific as what's their medical school placement situation like. Are they going to get you there? It might be, what are the MBA programs that the business majors and the economics majors tend to get to? Law schools. Some students are very specific. They may change, as we know, Mark, but it's a selling point for a college to say, you've got ambition, you're willing to work hard, we're going to deliver you on the path to where you want to go. If you're undecided, what's a college going to do for you? How do they structure their program for students who have many academic interests and need to know how the college will support them? Is there going to be an exploratory program? Are there certain advisors dedicated to kids with multiple academic interests and career ambitions? The last one, can you guess what it is, Mark? What's the last F?
Fit? Or was that encompassed in everything else?
It's feeling.
Feeling. Oh,
it's what you were just talking about.
Yes, the instinctive reaction when you set foot on the place. Is it the magnet pulling you in or repelling you? Yep. There
you go. And for some kids, depending on their personalities, it's a much stronger magnetic, come hither or run in the opposite direction
right.
kind of feeling. It really depends. I have some kids that are just super left-brained. They're very analytical. And I talk to them about their gut feeling and they're like, well, why would that matter to me?
Yeah.
Right? Well, yeah. And maybe for them, there is an affinity. They understand the affinity of, that comfort level for people like them. But a lot of people are a mixture of the affective and the analytical. And that gut feeling can be very, very important. So I put that at number 6, but that does not mean it's the least important. So parents, what you do with these 6 fit factors, fit dimensions, is you decide on what your scale is. Make sure it's your scale is always an odd number, right? Think Likert scale. So start with 1 to 5, 1 being high, 5 being low. And basically you're going to go through your college options: family, financial, focus, fellowship, future, feeling, and give each college a 1 to 5. And don't start adding things up until you're really at the end. And it will at least give you your own ranking scale, right? You can rank the colleges that are on the table. You've got acceptances, give them these 6 ratings, add them up for kind of the Stucker family rating or the Jones family, whoever you are out there. You don't go by someone else's rating. This is your family rating. And you know what? You may still bucket in the end. You may say, well, okay, I see how they line up. Whatever.
Right.
We're still going to go with what.
This is a
That's
22.
fine.
But you've thought through the process. Yeah.
Right.
Susan, this was fantastic. This was Susan Tree at her finest. Like, you actually shut me up for 10 to 15 minutes because I was in rapt attention. I was agreeing with every one of those points. And did you have the same 6 when you were at Westtown? Because I never heard you give this, or have you developed this since then? Maybe it's more your one-on-one counseling. I don't remember ever. I would have remembered you sharing this.
I didn't kind of unpack it in the same way. I when I was in our school, I was more around, 3 dimensions. Mm-hmm. But also, truthfully, in our school, Mark, families were very close to making the final decision when the acceptances came in. I have this one warm memory many years ago of a mother coming in holding a blank check. This was before families paid online to pay their deposit. She came in and it was all filled out and she handed it to me and she said, "I cannot talk about this with my son anymore. And get him in your office and make sure he doesn't leave your office until he fills in the name of the college and the amount." This is what the deposits were like $250, $300. Sure. There's some still are. But they had done this kind of exercise ad nauseum. And the student had, FOMO.
Sure.
It was fear of missing out. It was, if I choose, I even remember he ended up going to Hobart William Smith College. I can't remember what the other one was, though. That was the debate. But so we sat down and I kind of nailed him in the chair and said, "You're not leaving because I have the check. And you and I are going to mail it because we got to get it in the mail." But I found that most families, maybe because they were in a program like ours, where we were always focused on the process every step of the way. The school where I'm serving now is an interim. They have not had that kind of program. And I have a lot of senior families right now who have never, from my perspective, really done this.
Susan, I think you dropped a nugget on people they didn't know, that you're back in a school setting in an interim role, helping them out with their college counseling program while they search for a full-time replacement. So, because you wear a lot of hats, right? You're counseling,
that's right.
You're reading files at different schools, and now you've really come full circle back. What's it like being back in a school setting? It's been 5 years.
It's wonderful. It's wonderful to be back in a school. It's odd and awkward to come kind of just drop in to the lives of seniors right now.
When you haven't known them as juniors yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be a little better with the juniors because I can ramp them up this spring. Sure. And put together, a program for them. The seniors, I'm just there to be kind of a mentor to the family as they're going through this process, and they need to sit down or, talk with somebody and sort out their options. But it's a strange experience to just kind of drop in out of, the cloud. But you know what? You do what you can. It's a lovely school, a lovely group of families. I think the seniors are in great shape.
When you and I have held in high regards for years, we've always talked highly about the place where you're at. So I'm kind of excited for you.
Yeah.
Susan, I wanted to comment on a couple of the things that you said because I thought each of the F's was really profound. And I think anybody who's been doing this any length of time would sort of hear the sagacity in each of those comments because there was so much depth there. But starting out, one of the things, when you were talking about the visit, there's a few things you said that I wanted to comment on. So I've started literally doing something with my students, and it's working. It's something that just popped in my head. It's a bit of an analogy. And I do it, when they're at this point, I say to them, do you ever play cards? Of course, almost everybody plays cards, right? So they say yes. And then I say, have you ever shuffled a deck of cards? And they all say yes. And then I say, my experience is that if you take your 6 schools and you put them in order, let's say you're admitted to 6 schools and you put them in order 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. If you go visit all of those schools, I'm not saying everybody can get back to 6 schools. This is a little hyperbolic to make a point, but I said, your order is going to change. That's just the power of a visit. That's more the norm than the exception. And you're nodding your head over here, and so and it really resonates with them because they can picture shuffling cards. And sometimes I do this, I had a mom reach out to me the other day and she really planned it perfectly. I have to admit, she's like, my daughter won't listen to me, but she'll listen to you. Can you please, I'd work the second time working with the family. And they said, can you please try to tell her how important it is that we go to these admitted student visit programs? Because this is a student in an IB diploma program and it's really rigorous and she's high achieving and she doesn't want to miss any time. And so,
wow.
I did the shuffle the deck thing. And at the end, she said, this is really, really helpful. And I said, can I ask, what was helpful? And this was one of the points that she came back to, that deck shuffling thing. She said, I really do need to go to these events and so, or go get back on the campus. So I thought that point was really, really great. And then another point I was really glad you made was, even if you've already been before, there's something that's different when you're relaxed and you're in.
Absolutely.
That allows you to just process and just sort of imbibe the place. And it can really lead to a different reaction. Of course, these admitted student visit programs, and shout out to Marissa Salazar. I thought she did a great job, where we went through all 6 of the different type of visits.
Wonderful. Yes, absolutely wonderful.
But they're comprehensive too. Like a lot of times here's another analogy. Sometimes the regular visit is like going through the drive-through, to get fast food. It's pretty quick. Some schools, an hour and a half, you're in and you're out. Whereas the admitted student visit programs or the open houses on the front end, they can be like sitting down and having a 2, 3, 4 course meal where you're there for 2 to 3. Like you see so much more of the school. You're exposed to so many more people. You meet more people. And then there's this other aspect where the pressure's off and it puts you in a different state of mind. And the other thing is, I continue to be amazed, Susan, at how the college admission process is such a self-discovery process. So many of the students I work with, they come to realize toward the end, their values are different than they thought. Maybe values isn't the right word. Their wish list, their must-haves, they change.
That's right.
That's why when I'm working with a 10th grader, when someone comes earlier, I've implemented a new phase where, I used to do the full-blown questionnaire, study all the records, everything, build the list. Now I actually have them set foot on 6, 7, 8 campuses, especially if they're in a metro area and they can do all this without too long of a commute. And I want them to get back to me about tell me everything you liked and didn't like before I build their list, because they can fill a form out, but it's a theoretical abstraction. On our questionnaire, we say, do you like colleges under 3,000, 3 to 12, 12 to 25, 25 or larger? Check all the boxes that are appealing. Well, very different reaction when you go visit some schools and you come back and say, that felt too small. That felt too big. And so the self-discovery process happens. That's another component of it. The combination of the self-discovery coupled with you're now relaxed. It's funny. I know a lot of times in students and parents, especially if they're aspiring to highly selective schools, they sometimes describe the process almost like they're helpless and it feels like the school has all the power. But, schools will often say, I feel that way because starting out, applicants have all the power. There's several thousands of schools, and we're just hoping that you'll apply. Yeah, sure, we have the power after we make the decision, but then all the power shifts back to you again, and you're trying to pick us from 3, 4, 5, 6, 9 options. And so,
That's right.
It's an interesting pendulum power swing, this process. So I thought that point was really important one about like, even if you've already been, you're going to see it with a different set of eyes, whether it's your knowledge of self, you're relaxed. And then I really liked when you were talking about the whole fellowship, that piece. I think it's really important. I've borrowed some language that Sue Corner used when I interviewed her. She's been the director of admission at Willamette now for a long time, went there in the 80s and has just stayed other than a brief stint at Lewis and Clark. She just summarized it, are these my people? Is this my place? And that's kind of that piece that you're getting at a lot of times. Are these my people? Is this my place? Like, I love how you brought out sort of, it's important to people that they find their tribe or they feel like I can see myself around these students. That's extremely important, whatever that may mean, right? You gave a few examples. We could go on and on with many, many, many examples. And that's very individual what that may be for some people.
That's
and
right.
how they define that. And then you brought out another really important point. Like there's a person that prefers a more of a homogenous is such a disparaging word, but in an environment where there's not a lot of differences. And then there's a person that just repelled by that, and they feel really strongly about it. I want to meet different types of people, and all of that. And so, I think all of those points, and then that other point you brought out about family, that's really important, and I really appreciated that point because sometimes the process is described in a way where too much emphasis is put on this is the student's decision, in a singular way. And there are family decisions that are a part of it. And some of that is even the student's connection with the family. They may say, you know what? I've decided I want to be closer to my younger sibling who looks up to me, and I would rather be able to see him or her every other week or once a month as opposed to 2 or 3 times a year.
Sure.
There's just, you gave the example of an elderly parent. There's so many different family factors other than finances, which can also be family, that can come into play. A lot of families that I work with, they feel very strongly about this, so strong to the point where we actually added it to our questionnaire. And it's this question: how important is it to you that the school is close to an international airport? A lot of people feel very strongly about that. They don't mind a longer commute, but they don't mind an airfare, but they don't want to take a plane and then have a 2 to 3 hour drive to the school. Even if they're only making that trip 4 times a year, they feel very strongly about that. And so that could also be a fact. So there's just, we can't just give you simple 1, 2, 3, 4. These are you can do it beautifully the way you did it through through an analogy or an acronym. But different things are going to matter to different people. Then another point that I really liked that you made, it was your own personal experience. I like that you talked about the writing and how important that was to you, because sometimes I'll have a student who'll say something like, you know what? Big football games is really important to me. And maybe a parent might say, do you really need to be that shallow? And I'll push back and say, you know what? There's a lot of places you can get a great education. Nothing's wrong with these factors. For somebody else, they need to be by water. Somebody else wants to ski, or they want to be by mountains. Like there's just so many, we have this question we asked in our questionnaire that say, are there any facilities that are important to you? It's really interesting what people say there. Sometimes someone will say, I want a rock climbing wall close by. It's just like these different fun factors.
Starbucks.
Yes. I had a student
then I worry.
I had a student that said, I want a nice selection of Thai restaurants, and this student was number 1 in her class. So this is not like, oh, that sounds so shallow. Can you be more intellectual? Like, it's not like those having fun, enjoying your life, doing the things that you enjoy.
Well, it's what I call the happiness quotient, Mark.
Yes.
Is the happiness quotient throughout our life. You have to have enough happiness in order to power through what's hard.
I like it.
It's what buoys us up.
Yeah.
When the going gets tough.
Yeah, and it's going to be different for different people.
Yep.
And I also like
relationships, it's activities, and
no, you're right. And I also like the point you made at the end that if you've added up all your 1 through 5 scales, and one place is a 26 and another is a 22 or 23, you still may find your hardest calling you. I don't know if you remember this, Susan. You used to use this term at Westtown, and I've borrowed it from you. You used to say, "Is it singing at you?" Do you remember using that? You used to say that when
sure.
You sure did. When you visit the school, is it singing at you? I've borrowed that and incorporate that into my lexicon, but I first got that from you, and so maybe that's an indication your heart is really pulling you that way. But it's a great way to think through the process, and it's a great way not to miss something that can be important, because when you start thinking future, maybe that makes you take a look more at the institutional research or the career center or the outcomes or the internships or co-ops or whatever that is for you. And I think it's some acronyms are forced. This is not a forced acronym. Every point in those F's was very salient and really, really important. So much so to the point where, and I've never done this before, but I want to take this segment, and morph it into Julia's. And then this is actually a trilogy. Lisa's been working on preparing one purely from a psychology standpoint. What are the things you need to think of? And I'm going to ask Nemanja, our sound engineer, to morph them together. And I'm going to add this into the interview, in the interview. Because it's easy for people to just go see an interview, play the whole thing, versus like you had to, Susan reached, she won't mind me saying this. She reached out and she said, "I really love Julia's section. What was that on?" So she went hunting back to find 402, right? And you found it. Whereas if we have it all together. Because
I listened to it while I was driving and I couldn't take notes.
Yeah, but if we can have it all together, sort of with the tapestry of, Julia and you and then Lisa, and we'll get it up as a interview. I think it'll be great for our listeners. And, I've been using some of segments like this, lots of them. Matt Bonser's one, he's doing on the gap year and all of these different ones, and having them be our assigned homework really for families, to listen to this if you want to get an education on this. And this is one I'm going to have everybody listen to, because I have to thank Nishant for sending this question in, because it's actually a really important decision, and he said to me, "I'm looking through all your past catalogs. I can't find a segment you did on this." And we did do one, but it was literally like 2018 or 19. I said, I couldn't find it either. It was so long ago.
Oh, wow.
But I was like, how come we haven't addressed this question? But this is what's great by having, what you say, QFL, so a question for listeners, having so many different people out there asking things that, we don't always have to be the one to think of the ideas for the content. There was one other thing I wanted to share. I'm going to do it by way of anecdote. So I had a family from the Midwest say to me recently, and this is a student who applied widely, and now he has a lot of options. And, you and I are recording this on February 29th. So this conversation was probably February 23rd, I'd say. It was less than 7 days, but more than 4 days ago. And they were saying, he has to decide. He just has to decide. And I said, he still has 2 months and a week. There's a saying I learned a while ago, and a lot of this is, I think, true in a spiritual sense. Like, truth and time go hand in hand. Like, the longer you wait, it's almost like driving and you see an object that's far away and it comes into focus as you get closer. So I tell students, like, you have until May 1. I said to them, May 15th for a lot of schools this year because of the FAFSA snafu. Some even have June. Take your time. Don't impose an artificial day when you say, I'm so tired of this angst. I'm making my decision next Tuesday. Like, don't do that, because it will come a lot of times into clearer focus the longer you wait. Any thoughts on that?
That's a very good point, Mark.
Well, this has been a really fun conversation for me. I've enjoyed it immensely. And, you know, I'm going to share something that Susan doesn't know I'm going to share this, but, you know, Susan is very humble, but she's someone who's had tremendous influence out here in the world of college admissions. And, you know, we've had Brennan Barnard on our podcast 3 times, one of the counselors that was under Susan's tutelage. And he has an article coming out in Forbes today giving a tribute to Susan and kind of the impact that she had on his life. And so I encourage you listeners to go to Forbes and sort of see Brennan talking about how Susan's mentorship sort of set him up for who he is today. So you've been touching lives for decades, Susan, and we're thrilled to have you on our podcast. You didn't know I was going to do that. I don't even know if you knew that I knew about
Mark.
That you knew that I knew that. But yeah, Brendan and I were texting a lot early today, and I said, when is it airing? He said, Monday. I'm like, well, that's when this is airing. This is perfect. So I'm going to tell our listeners to go read what Brendan had to say about you. Yeah, awesome. All right. Well, we'll look forward to seeing you next week. Thank you, Nishant, for that great question.
Well, thank you for that.
And now it's time for our College Spotlight of the Week.
Friends, if you're a regular listener of our podcast, you heard Andy Strickler about 4 weeks ago on this right here, Monday's episode, talking about reading from a large school group or a busy school group. Well, Andy's back, and he's doing a deep dive on Connecticut College over the next 3 weeks. So in part 1, Andy tells us how the mission statement impacts the student experience. Andy answers the question, why come to College? Andy tells us how the honor code impacts the experience at Connecticut College. Andy talks to us about how they create community at Connecticut College. Andy talks about how the history of formerly being a women's college impacts the culture at College. And finally, Andy talks about how Connections, which is their curriculum, is the hallmark of the College experience. Listen and enjoy. Well, this has been great. This has been absolutely awesome, Andy. Can we transition now and talk College?
Absolutely, Mark. Anything you want to know, man.
Great. So I'm just going to dive right in, and let's talk about the mission statement of and how does that impact the culture of the school?
Well, the mission statement to put the liberal arts in action really influences everything that we do here. Our curriculum, the manner by which we operate campus, student life, everything that we do is influenced by that. And that, you know, I mean, most small liberal arts colleges are places where people are engaged and involved. Here at it's a little bit more customized. It's a little bit more personalized. It's a little bit more individualized. And there are some expectations that students take the work that they're doing here and take it into the world in a real world setting via a requirement for local global engagement, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So the mission statement, I mean, you know, I've had the privilege of working, I had the privilege of working for Catherine Bergeron for the last 8 years. And there wasn't a day that went by where she didn't talk about the mission statement and what we're here to do. So it's a critical part of who we are and what we do and how we're driven.
And some of this question might overlap with the last one, but I don't think all of it will. So, you know, admission officers are very prone to asking students to write a why us essay. I love asking the admission officers the same question. Why College? Why should a student consider Connecticut College?
That's a really great question.
It's easier to ask it than get asked it, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. I would say 2 things. Academics in the curriculum allows you to have everything that you're doing pulling in the same direction, allowing you as a student to investigate a particular question or topic that is of particular interest to yourself. And second is the community here is phenomenal. The honor code We're one of about 12 to 14 institutions in the country that have a student-run honor code that oversees both the academic and the social/residential universes. And it creates a slightly different sense of community here. We're very egalitarian, we're very social justice oriented, a little less cliquey than some other places maybe I've seen. And it's the reason why I'm still here 9 years later. And it's not the faculty and staff community that really gets me, it's the student community that gets me here. And honestly, the last month or so with our students have been really kind of boring. This weekend when they come back and classes start on Monday and Tuesday, that's great because we'll be able to have our students back and I'll be able to see them around campus.
Talk to me about the honor code a little more. What does that look like? What are the things that students implement that enhances the student experience? If they were here, what would they say? How would they speak to that?
I think the students would speak to the level of trust that the institution extends to them. The most visceral example of how the honor code works is final exams being self-scheduled and self-proctored, which gives students a great deal of flexibility and freedom, but also a great deal of ownership when it comes to academic integrity. Academic, social, community integrity is not something that the adults maintain and uphold here. This is something that students maintain and uphold. And it creates a richer set of values and dynamics between individual students as they cruise through this campus over the course of 4 years. So I think if you ask our students, what's the best thing about Con? There are two answers you'll get. One, that it's small, and two, that there's an honor code. And as a result, they're given greater sense of ownership when it comes to values and the ties that bind this community together in really meaningful and deep ways.
This one thing I think you don't know about me, Andy, but my oldest daughter is a graduate of Davidson College.
Exactly. Davidson is another honor code school.
Yeah.
I talk about Davidson and I talk about Haverford.
Sure. There's the other one, student-run honor code. Yeah.
Yep.
And there's another one thing that, like, my daughter would absolutely attest to how that powerfully impacted her experience at Davidson. Yep. And there's another similarity between the two schools that I think is powerful. Davidson's a 4-year residential requirement. You guys are like 97, 98, 99% residential. Talk about how that creates community.
Oh, well, not only 98, 99% residential, but the admissions office is on the south side of campus where typically upper class students live. And I can look out my window here and see JA and Freeman, which are two pretty popular upper class residence halls. And I look out here on a random Friday afternoon year round and almost never see cars parked outside with people loading their car to go home for the weekend. So it's the residential piece, but it's also the community piece that's 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, that drives learning and drives relationship building in some very meaningful ways here. Without a Greek system, because we don't have a Greek system, it leads to a slightly different social dynamic here. So the residential piece, the honor code piece, the lack of a Greek system piece feed into this relationship building with people from different backgrounds, and community building that is really rich and deep. And that's part of the reason why I was talking about the students and the community and why it's my favorite part about the college, because it's so powerful. It really is.
No, you articulated that well. So Conn College was a women's college until 69? I know the 60s.
69, yeah.
69.
Correct.
So how does that history influence the culture, the values, the perspective? Because we know history impacts the present.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the honor code was started in 1922 when we were an all-women's college, because we were founded in 1911. So it's been part of our history and culture and heritage for over 100 years at this point. But the other two vestiges of Connecticut College being CCW, Connecticut College for Women, first I already mentioned is no Greek system. The second, no football team, which means we are literally undefeated since 1911, which is amazing, okay?
That is amazing.
Really, we're the only NESCAC school that is undefeated in football for at least the last century, which is quite awesome. But the lack of a Greek system and the lack of football, which are vestiges of being an all-women's college, are such a critical part of the sense of community that exists here. For athletes, for artists, for other folks involved in other co-curricular activities, there's just so much more oxygen and more time and attention that can be spent on all these other things that are going on our campus. It just allows the spotlight to go in so many different directions. It's amazing.
You know, I want to go back to the curriculum you referred to. Talk to us about your connections courses and how they shape the student experience. And also, you guys also have a capstone project too. Talk about both of those two.
Correct.
Things.
So connections, as we call it, is essentially a philosophy of integrative education. I describe it this way. You can think about a liberal arts experience having a number of different components. Classes in your major, your required classes outside your major, maybe a study abroad, maybe an internship, maybe a senior project. At other institutions, one or more of these components can be really kind of disconnected and have nothing to do with anything else. At Con, the typical Con student will integrate all of these experiences underneath a central theme that they choose. So our curriculum is very interdisciplinary in nature, but it allows them in an interdisciplinary fashion to tie together what they're doing in their major with required coursework outside their major, with their study abroad, with their internship, and then they summarize it all via a capstone project or senior project. And that senior project is driven by what we call an animating question, which is the one question that is just rattling around in the student's head that they want to investigate and answer. And they spend their last 2.5 years just diving in on it. The one question that popped to me, and we have an all-college symposium in November every year, where all students who have opted into this present the findings of their senior project and their work. And the one animating question that I always come back to, and again, because I'm a history and politics guy who studied the politics of gender and race, the one question that really grabbed me is one of our seniors asked, her animating question was, why are female reproductive rights always legislated and adjudicated? And she spent her last 2.5 years just investigating that question because that's what she wanted to do. One of our cross-country athletes from 2 years ago investigated the intersection between socialized body image and female endurance athletes. That was her question that she wanted to investigate. And she was able to leverage all elements of our academic experience here to investigate and dive in and then present that at the end. So really, that's what I was talking about earlier when it's customized, it's individualized, it's personalized, because by the time the student's a sophomore, there's a question rattling around in their head, and we're designed to help them articulate that question and then chase it for the last 2 years that they're here.
That's awesome. Friends, this concludes the first part of my 3-part interview with Andy Strickler on Connecticut College, but we hope you'll sign up because Andy's doing a 1-hour Q&A in less than a month. Just go to yourcollegeboundkid.com, click the events tab, and sign up. You can ask Andy any question you see. He's very transparent, very wise, and very student-centered. On Thursday's episode, I continue with Matt Bonser. We're talking all things gap year as Matt answers 20 frequently asked questions about taking a gap year, and it'll be part 3 of 3. I haven't decided what Speakpipe question we're going to pick yet, so it may depend on what goes down in the world of college admissions this week or what the pulse I'm sensing from you guys, but we'll definitely have a question from a listener. And we'll have the third and final part of the interview with Hannah and Nora, 2 college coaches at ScholarMatch, explaining the work they do and the opportunity that's available for you if you want to help a student. And by the way, you only need to take one student. You don't need to sign up for many. I've heard from a few of you who are very interested in this. Some of you have been concerned with, I just want to do it, but I'm just not sure if I have the time. My recommendation, start with one and see if you like it. If so, maybe you do a second one if you decide to do it next year. And for our spotlight, speaking about not letting things get stale, Lisa and I recorded a spotlight on Marquette. I swear it was over 4 months ago. And so that's one reason why we're doing this Monday, Thursday thing, because sitting there, not that too much has drastically changed at Marquette in the last 4 months, but still, when it's an interview, they don't really like it. When they come on an interview and you're like, oh yeah, your interview will go live in 7 months. That's what I did actually with Gary Clark from UCLA. So much so to the point when he said something, there had been a slight change and one of the counselors called it out. It's not like he was inaccurate. It's just that I did the interview 7 months before it aired. So that'll be Thursday's podcast. But friends, remember, it's not where you go. It's not where you go. It's not where you go. It's what you do when you get there and what you do when you get out of there. See you on Thursday, friends. And that's our show. A big thank you to you, our listeners, for tuning in this week. If you find this podcast helpful, please follow us and you'll get every single episode as soon as it is released. If you're interested, there are a few ways you can really support our podcast. You can click the share button and send it to your friends and acquaintances. You can help us pay our staff and our expenses by donating on our website. You can write a review for us on Apple or Spotify. I'm the producer of the podcast, but we have a fantastic team of 15. Shout out to our co-host, Dr. Lisa Ruff, Dr. David Williams, Linda Depker, Susan Tree, Vince Garcia, and Julia Esquivel. And to our substitute co-host, Sylvia Borgo. Our sensational sound engineer is Nemanja Motvich. Our amazing music is from Victor Allen Weeks. Marketing designs are from Kimberly Blass. Lily Parikh manages our Instagram. Our image editor is Talha Khan. Joyce Ducker does our website episode updates. And our webmaster is Stalianos Dimitriou. And if you want to have a coaching session with Lisa, Linda, or me, just text me at 404-664-4340. If you have a question you want us to answer, or if you have a recommended resource or article you think we should discuss, just send it to questions@yourcollegeboundkid.com. Our favorite method is for you to record your own voice at speakpipe.com/YCBK. By the way, check out our website, where you'll find lots of content that is not on any podcast app. Our website is yourcollegeboundkid.com. If you want to learn about other hot admissions topics, follow us on Twitter at YCBK Podcasts. We think of you as our listening family, and we look forward to meeting again with you every single Monday and Thursday.